Welcome to the College Basketball Bracket Science Podcast, your encyclopedia for the college basketball season. The 2024-2025 season is officially over. We took a couple weeks off. Now it's time to start talking about the 2025-2026 season. As you can see on this graphic, the Final Four will take place in Indianapolis in just under a year. So it's about time to start talking, next year's hoops. We're going to talk about a ton today. We're not going to dive into anything too briefly because as you see on these little bullet points on the graphic here, we're going to talk coaching carousel. We're going to talk about our first transfer rankings. Now, for those who don't really know, transfer rankings, like if you think one person who's ranked 50th is better than the guy who's ranked 25th, it really doesn't matter. It's basically just a way to label the guys, some of the big names at the top, just more so labeling the guys in the transfer portal. The rankings I kind of just threw together and cut it off at 75. Who, some notable names that I thought people should really know. So if you're into more like deep dive, go to 24/7 Sports. They got all kinds of stuff like that, but there's really no point because one person could fit in a system completely different than another person fits. It's just basically labeling these players. So we will talk about some good fits and bad fits. We'll talk about freshmen to know, and then the championship odds for 2025-26 for those thinking of, we do have one best bet, which we will talk about for those who are looking to already place a little bit of action. So what is going to happen for the upcoming weeks? So basically all of these little bullet points, like the coaching carousel, we're going to do an in-depth, grading analysis on all the new coaching hires that we'll have in college hoops next year. So like we'll label some of the big ones today. It's basically just going to be a preview of what we're going to talk about a ton throughout the entire offseason. But today we are going to, we're going to mention all the names. We're going to mention the top guys in the transfer portal. We'll just get a little bit more in-depth in some shows that'll be following this. We will do our way too early top 25 that everyone seems to be, starting to get out there already. We're starting to build some rosters. So we'll do a way too early top 25 in a show. As mentioned, those coaching carousel grades. We'll do some of the transfer portal rankings where we'll dive in depth, which this will be, best transfer fits, transfer fits that, maybe the player isn't as talented as, the PJ Haggerty, Yaxel Lendenborgs, but we will see who fits well into a particular system. So we'll talk about all of that with some roster breakdowns, putting, just seeing what the actual rosters look like at this current time. Like some rosters really filling up. Miami, Indiana, really filling up rosters, but then there's some others who are, taking a little slower approach. So by then, hopefully we have a better knowledge of what the rosters will look like for next year. We will do a freshman to know, we'll talk, just kind of inform a little bit about the AJ DeBances, about the Darren Petersons, talk about them a little bit. NBA draft recap. We're going to talk about all of that. We'll do preseason All-Americans, some rule changes. So we have a lot that will be going on in the offseason, just labeled down through the list. So be sure to hit that like and subscribe button. So, you can follow on some of these fun little topics that we'll be talking about all year. And then follow us on Instagram and TikTok at Bracket Science with 2 S's. Haven't been posting much on there, but we will start posting, more stuff like this. You'll see some graphics today. Not the prettiest graphics, just kind of, putting it together. Going to talk some hoops. Let's dive right into it. Let's start with the coaching carousel. So right here, as you can see, it's just literally on notes, and then we'll make some graphics for Instagram and TikTok. But this is page 1 of 2, should mention. So if you don't see it on here, these are just some of the notable ones. I didn't do, the low major ones, the Florida A&Ms, no disrespect, but no, just kind of kept at the top dogs here. So the coaching carousel, Kevin Willard going from Maryland to Villanova. This, was the big one. Kevin Willard led Maryland to the Sweet 16 this year, the Crab Five. They were a tremendous basketball team. And then he basically dug himself a hole. It seemed like he was kind of using Maryland did not have an AD during this time. And he was it seemed like he was trying to leverage for more money at Maryland, but it got to a point where the fan base just kind of hated him and was ready for him to leave. So he ends up going to Villanova to replace Kyle Neptune, and that just kind of failure of a hire over at Villanova. Kevin Willard from Maryland to Villanova. So that opened up Maryland, where Texas A&M's Buzz Williams goes from Texas A&M to Maryland. So as a reminder, I'm not going to really give grades on this because we are going to have a full episode on that, but just kind of labeling through what has happened. So that had the, Buzz Williams brings over a a interesting strategy and tactic that the Texas A&M had, just fire up threes and offensive rebound the crap out of the ball. He'll bring that to Maryland. Should be a fun team again. Bucky McMillan from Samford, Buckyball going to Texas A&M to replace Buzz Williams. Texas A&M kind of taking a flyer here. Buckyball loves to press. Will this fly at the next level and in the best conference that we saw last year, which was the SEC? We will see about that. And then Samford was left to hire Lenny Acuff from Lipscomb, where Lipscomb ended up internally hiring. So that cut off the coaching carousel for this, which is why there is a little bit of a break here. All right, moving down the list, Fran McCaffrey was at Iowa. They ended up letting him go, and he now goes back to his old roots, goes to Penn. Obviously, real smart school. Fran McCaffrey, a little bit of a change of scenery. Should do a good job there, I would think. But Ben McCollum, the big hire, probably, most people's favorite hire of the offseason, going from Drake to Iowa. Won Division II championships, started up at Drake last year. All he did was win a game in March Madness, just dominate the entire regular season. Ben McCollum going to bring in a lot of money at Iowa that they're going to get back on track under Ben McCollum. Very confident in that. So Drake was left open again, as it seems to be frequently. Eric Henderson from South Dakota State, the successful coach there, moves on to Drake. And then South Dakota State, I know I ended up putting it on here. I didn't do it for all of them, but South Dakota State just internally hired with Brian Peterson moving up from the assistant role to the head coaching role. They got a lot of funds over at South Dakota State. So we'll talk more about that in the coaching grades episode. The other one, Sean Miller goes from Xavier to Texas. Yes, Sean Miller leaves Xavier for the second time in his career. Xavier fans probably just hate Sean Miller, except they brought in Richard Pitino. This is a fantastic hire. I'll give you that one. It was about as good of a as big a name as Xavier could probably get. Richard Pitino, son of Rick Pitino, pretty good stuff there. He moves on from New Mexico to Xavier. And then Eric Olson replaces Richard Pitino at New Mexico, the coach of UC San Diego last year. Led them to a 12 seed, almost beat Michigan in that opening round. Eric Olson, one of the nicest guys and just friendliest guys on TV that you'll ever see. So should be a lot of fun there. So Indiana fired Mike Woodson. It's about time. They moved on from Mike Woodson, maybe a year too late. They could have had Dusty May last year, but they get Darian DeVries, pretty solid hire, moving over from West Virginia, formerly at Drake. That West Virginia team was, quite frankly, should have been in the tournament last year. They obviously ended up squeezing in North Carolina instead of West Virginia. They got the rough end of that. So Darian DeVries moves on after 1 year at West Virginia to Indiana, opening up the West Virginia job, where Ross Hodge from North Texas takes the West Virginia job. Obviously, Ross Hodge followed Grant McCaslin at North Texas. North Texas just wins. They're a great program. Ross Hodge, I think, will be successful at West Virginia. So the North Texas job opens up. And Cleveland State's Daniel Robinson decides to take that job. Kind of an interesting hire here. Didn't really foresee this one going on, but Daniel Robinson taken over at North Texas. And then Rob Summers from the Missouri assistant tree under Dennis Gates goes to Cleveland State, because funny enough, Dennis Gates was the head coach at Cleveland State a couple of years ago. He ended up going to Missouri. Rob Summers now goes from Missouri to Cleveland State. So little bit of a back and forth action there. And then Nico Medved goes from Colorado State to Minnesota. This seemed like the most surefire thing. He's got roots at Minnesota. And then Ali Farouk-Namesh takes over at Colorado State. He was the Colorado State assistant last year. Big name, was always bound to be a head coach. Northern Iowa legend back when they beat Kansas years and years ago. They internally hire. They're stopping the carousel. Let's move on to page 2 of the hires as it loads in right here. We talked about that. Ryan Odom goes from VCU to Virginia. How about that? Ryan Odom from VCU to Virginia, just sticking in state. Ryan Odom is moving up the coaching realms pretty quickly here. He's going to do a good job there. And then Phil Martelli Jr. goes from Bryant to VCU. He's also going to, seems to be en route to making a name for himself. Obviously, he's got a very familiar name from Phil Martelli, but going to do good stuff there. Will Wade goes from McNeese to NC State. This, outside of Ben McCollum, this is probably the most popular hire, maybe even more popular of a hire. Will Wade, back in Power 5, goes to NC State, and he is rolling right away, picking up some good additions. And then Bill Armstrong, the McNeese assistant, is now the head coach over at McNeese. Was just kind of set up for him to take over for Will Wade. Onto another coaching carousel. Jake Lucas takes over at Miami. He was the former Duke assistant. Remember, he left Duke in the right before the NCAA tournament to go to Miami, and everyone thought, yeah, maybe you got to do that to recruit a little bit, or you have to or just kind of ride it out. It was kind of a little controversial on whether he should have done that. No other coach on this list ended up leaving their team to go, get a head start on the new job. So maybe not the best look for Jay Lucas, just kind of how things ended up unfolding. No other coach ended up doing it, but Jay Lucas did. He's on to Miami. He's putting together a lot of talent. We'll see how it fits. Curious to see what goes on there at Miami. And then Josh Pastner. These are, I guess I probably should mention, these are just kind of, random ones. This isn't a legit carousel. Josh Pastner goes as a ESPN reporter to ESPN analysis, to UNLV. He's got history. He's not like he's Doug Gottlieb or anything. He has experience, and he is going to UNLV. Luke Laux goes from the NBA to Florida State, an assistant coach in the NBA, straight to Florida State. Same as Alex Jensen, who is going from the NBA as an assistant coach to Utah. Brian Hodgson going from Arkansas State to USF. Now, we will talk about, who's the Arkansas State replacement, who's the Bryant replacement. We'll talk about all of that in our coaching carousel episode. We're just kind of labeling, the big jobs that are up for grabs. Alan Huss goes from High Point to be the head coach in waiting at Creighton under Doug McDermott. So probably 1 or 2 more years of Doug McDermott is what I'm thinking, or else I wouldn't believe Alan Huss would have taken this, if you're waiting for, hey, just whenever he wants to. No, I believe it'll be just a couple more years of Greg McDermott, and Alan Huss will take over at Creighton. Big name, Alan Huss, good coach. I think that Creighton's going to be in good hands. You don't see this too often anymore with a kind of hiring outside of the box a coach in waiting. So kind of different there. And then Flynn Clayman takes over at High Point, just internal hire there, as he was an assistant coach last year. So that's, some of the biggest schools, biggest names that are going to new places. Once again, we'll talk about it all during our coaching carousel, just separate podcast with everything. Next up, let's talk transfer portal. We're going to go through our top 75. Our top 75 now, as mentioned, you just kind of get to putting these in order. It's so hard even to rank 75 teams, let alone ranking 75 players who are completely different players. So take it as you will. I just wanted to label some of the big names that have already committed, some guys that are still in the transfer portal. One guy that is still in the transfer portal, PJ Haggerty from Memphis, averaged over 20 a game last year. He is, I debated him or Lindeborg as number 1 overall. I just think he just proved it last year that this guy is like a must get. Now, rumor has it, it's not a rumor. I guess it was kind of proven. He's asking for over $4 million. I wouldn't do that. I would not give him $4 million, quite frankly. I do think he's the best player in this portal. I don't think he's worth $4 million. Now, these guys, I'm not against, players getting paid. I think they should be getting paid. But $4 million, most of these budgets are, there's a select few with over $12, $14 million. But, a lot of them are, 8 million, 10 million. That's half of your payroll. PJ Haggerty, no disrespect. He's awesome. He also wants to play point guard. A lot of demands for a guy, which is why I would not be too shocked if he ends up back at Memphis and, ends up playing for Penny Hardaway. Penny Hardaway does basically, sounds like as soon as PJ Haggerty said, hey, I'm going in the transfer portal, I want $4 million. Penny Hardaway's like, I can't give you that. I can't give you that. If you ever want to come back, you're welcome to come back. Obviously, he's a great player. But, $4 million, that's steep. That's steep. We saw this a couple times last year, and it never really seemed to work out. Greg Osbar at Washington. Washington wasn't very good, and he got what was rumored as one of the highest NIL packages. Same goes for Coleman Hawkins. It didn't work out too well. Now, you may mention PJ Haggerty is probably better than both of those guys, and obviously different players, but $4 million, that's a lot of money. At number 2, now we're not going to talk as in depth, just, obviously these top guys we'll talk about a little bit more. Yaxel Lindeborg going from UAB to Michigan. Fantastic player, double machine. Going to Michigan, probably even more fantastic. This is a perfect fit. Dusty May brings in Yaxel Lindeborg. We'll talk about Dusty May quite a bit here because, look down at number 19 on this list. Ademara also going to Michigan, just going to keep this too big thing. They're going to be really good next year. So Yaxel Lendeberg going to Michigan. RJ Lewis, number 3 at St. John's. Obviously kind of a rough little ending there at St. John's. He got benched in the NCAA tournament after his rough shooting performance. Immediately went to the transfer portal. Now you will notice a lot of these guys, I don't have them labeled, but a lot of these guys are also in the NBA draft process. But, if you're top 25 on this list, you're probably going to make more money in college basketball than in the NBA, at least to start. So I expect a lot of these guys to be coming back, quite frankly. At number 4, Donovan Dent from New Mexico to UCLA, another high NIL package. Seems like a good fit. Over here at UCLA, we'll talk about a couple of the UCLA guards that are transferring out: Sebastian Mack, Dylan Andrews. Donovan Dent, I like it a lot better than the Sebastian Mack, Dylan Andrews little duo they had going on there. At 5 is Bennett Sturts going from Drake to Iowa. Didn't even really feel like a transfer just because he's going with his coach. He's going with Bennett Sturts Bennett Sturts is going with Ben McCollum to Iowa. Already knows the system. He's going to be awesome. I think he'll be an NBA player one day. Same goes for Tucker DeVries, just following his dad from West Virginia to Indiana. Going to be a lot of fun there. Bennett Sturts versus Tucker DeVries, and with Ben McCollum and Darian DeVries in the Big Ten this year is going to be a whole lot of fun. 7th is Jameer Watkins, who probably should have entered the transfer portal last year. He did enter the transfer portal last year, ended up coming back to Florida State, and Florida State has just not been good lately. He is in the NBA draft process as he tested last year. He's testing the waters. I do expect him to be back and hopefully somewhere better than Florida State. And number 8, this one's a little bit high. I'm a little higher on than most people. Tyon Grant Foster from Grand Canyon. He started out as a Kansas commit, had real bad health problems. I believe it was the heart issue that we've been seeing dealt with a lot with the with Bronny James news. I believe, I'm not 100% sure on that. So I don't want to spread false information, but I do believe that was he had health problems nevertheless. Goes to Grand Canyon, becomes a 20-point per game guy last year, 2 years ago. And then this past year, he was kind of off the court, on the court, a little, dealt with some injuries. They end up making the NCAA tournament and they didn't win a game as they did the year before, but still a really good team. I think Tyon Grant Foster's awesome. He was a highly recruited guy out of high school. I think he's going to make a big impact, whichever team he goes to. At number 9, I do have Boogie Fland. Boogie Fland is the one guy on here that I will note says he's going to probably 95% chance be in the NBA draft. He's in with both feet. Worst case, he will come back and probably make over $1 million in college, but he's the one who will probably go to the NBA if I had to say so myself. Cedric Coward, another one of those who might end up in the NBA. Probably a good chance he does. He's going from Washington State. Crystal Ball says Duke. It's either Duke or Alabama it's down to. I think it will be Duke. It seems like everything's leaning towards Duke. 6'6" guard from Washington State, going to be he's an elite scorer. He's going to be a good NBA player, or will be a good fit at Duke or Alabama. Silas Demery going from Georgia to UConn. Absolutely love this fit. So you might notice I might get a little influenced by fit a little bit and moving them up, but I'm trying to just, label them as players in general. Silas Demery, bright future. He's going to be a really good guard. I think with the right coaching, no disrespect to Mike White. Yikes. I think he's going to fit in real well with Dan Hurley at UConn. At 12, I got Keyshawn Hall from UCF going to Auburn. Big name, Keyshawn Hall, elite scorer at UCF. Auburn getting a ton of guys. I'm not sure they're my favorite guys in terms of fit, but Bruce Pearl has such a good culture over there. I'm sure he will be able to make it work. Keyshawn Hall heading there. Ryan Conwell from Xavier heading just down the road to Louisville. Obviously, tremendous three-point shooter, should fit in perfectly at Louisville. Farrell Payne follows his coach from Texas A&M to Maryland, follows Buzz Williams. He is an elite athlete. I think he's got a bright future ahead of him. Jaden Quaintance from Arizona State to Kentucky. 15 might seem a little bit low. I'm just a little worried about the offensive game. I mean, he's going to be an absolute monster defensively. If you're looking for a breakout guy, it could be Jaden Quaintance. If he gets some offense, to really take a giant leap this season. I mean, he is just an absolute beast down low. He's huge. He's muscular. He's lengthy. He is when you think of an NBA prospect, you think of Jaden Quaintance. Should work out well with Mark Pope over at Kentucky. If someone can teach you offense, it's probably Mark Pope and their tremendous offense last year. Adrian Wooley's going from Kennesaw State to Louisville, another elite three-point shooter. Should be a lot of fun to see him move up the level. We'll see if he can take that giant leap. Ian Jackson going from North Carolina to St. John's. Ian Jackson has the potential to be an elite offensive player. I think this was the one where I think it was kind of unexpected for him to enter the transfer portal because, a lot of people don't transfer from North Carolina. A lot of people don't transfer from Duke, from Kansas. You've already made it there. You're at the elite of the elite. I think this was a good move for him entering the transfer portal. And this is kind of just a little bit, I guess, throwing shade at Hubert Davis. I'm a little concerned about his internal development, but I guess we will. I guess we'll see in that route. But someone we know will internally develop is Rick Pitino. He is going to make his players better. So I got Ian Jackson at 17. 18, I got Darian Williams, the kind of glue guy at Texas Tech. Moving on from the Elite Eight. We'll see where he ends up. And then 19, we already mentioned him, Ade Mara from UCLA, 7'3". Yes, Michigan's going to be huge again going to Dusty May. Ade Mara, the Axel Lendenberg from Michigan. I really like what Dusty May's doing over there. He's a star upcoming is Dusty May. He'll be in a Final Four, I think, sooner than we'll realize. Rob Wright, going from Baylor to BYU, supposedly got a couple million, I believe near $3 million for Rob Wright. Whew, that is steep. BYU can just throw money about at whoever they want. We'll talk about AJ DeBanza here in a little bit. It was rumored he got like $7 million. Yeah, that BYU is going to be forced to be reckoned with for a while. At 21, I got Bryce Hopkins going from Providence to St. John's, staying in conference. If Bryce Hopkins healthy, he could be at the top of this list. He is an elite player. He just battles injuries often. At 22, Darian Reed from Alabama. Darian Reed, didn't really have as big of an impact as a lot of people might have thought last year at Alabama. He's a 5-star recruit. He didn't seem like a typical Alabama player. I don't even know how to really describe it. I think it was kind of for the best for him to enter the transfer portal. And definitely the same for Jaleel Bethia from Miami to Alabama. I love this fit. I think he's going to be awesome. People forget he was a 5-star prospect. He was like a top 5 prospect last year. Yeah, he's going to be really good at Alabama. Nate Oates will get him going. Him and LeBaron Philon. Whew, that's nasty. Alabama going to be a force to be reckoned with yet again. Jacoby Gillespie going from Maryland to Tennessee. How about Rick Barnes doing some work in the transfer portal this year? Getting Jacoby Gillespie. We'll talk about Rick Barnes here. I believe I have him in. We'll talk about him here in a little bit. Hosan Sanan from Arizona State to St. John's. Another just kind of screams Rick Pitino type guard. I really like this going from Bobby Hurley to Rick Pitino. Yeah, a little bit of an upgrade there. I think Hosan Sanan he's an elite offensive player. He is going to thrive at St. John's. I really like what Rick Pitino's putting together there. They've got a good chance St. John's has a good chance to be really elite again next year. All right, let's move on to 26 through 50. At 26, Henry Visar going from Arizona to North Carolina. I like this pickup. Henry Visar really emerged last year. Tommy Lloyd's internal development at Arizona seemed to really pay off with Henry Visar going to North Carolina. Seems like a good fit. He'll probably be your starting 5-man there. Obi Agim from Wyoming heading to Baylor, an elite scorer, elite shooter. He was a freshman last year at Wyoming and shot the lights out of the ball. I think he's gonna be a good fit at Baylor. Baylor lost every single player. They are going to have a completely new roster unless someone miraculously decides to come back. I think that was kind of for the best. I know they won a game in March Madness last year, but it wasn't an elite Baylor team. Dayton Thomas going from UNLV to LSU. Yes, how about Matt McMahon at LSU picking up a highly regarded guy? Dayton Thomas should be a pretty solid fit there. Xavion Lee, this one kind of broke headlines going from Princeton to Florida. The big pickup for Florida in this transfer portal. Xavion Lee tested draft waters last year. Thought he was going to test him this year, but it seems like he's leaning more towards just coming back to Florida. Rodney Rice going from Maryland to USC. Speaking of programs that have infinite NIL funds, USC. Yes, Rodney Rice was been rumored to be about $3 million. Yes, to go to USC. So USC is investing in Eric Musselman. We'll see how that one works out. At 31, Dylan Mitchell going from Cincinnati to St. John's. I saw Dylan Mitchell play a couple times in person this year. One of the best athletes I've ever seen in my life. His length, his just quickness, he's agile, could be awesome. The question is, why isn't he awesome? He's got all the tools. He can't shoot. If they can develop him a shot, he looks like he should be an NBA guy, but we'll see what what Rick Pitino can do there. Michael Ratish from Oregon State going to Baylor. So Baylor kind of just trying to fill out this roster. Elite scorer from Oregon State. James Scott from Louisville is uncommitted right now. Surprised he left, but that's the nature of college basketball now. I thought he would kind of fit in well with the shooters that they're bringing in. He's a big guy. So he's leaving Louisville. He's up for grabs right now, as is Desmond Claude from USC. Kind of surprised USC didn't retain him, but this is one of the bigger names. He was at Xavier prior to that. We'll see what Desmond Claude can do. Trayson Eaglestaff from North Dakota State moving to West Virginia. How about Ross Hodge picking up Trayson Eaglestaff? He dropped 51 in a game last year in the Summit League tournament. 51, an elite scorer. I'm curious, and I mean curious to see if this hits at West Virginia, if he can just be an elite scorer. Solomon Washington going from Texas A&M following his coach Buzz Williams to Maryland. Speaking of elite athletes, people should not be able to jump the way Solomon Washington can jump. My goodness, he is a crazy athlete. If he can develop a shot, he could be an NBA player. At 37, I got Xavier Brown from St. Joe's. So St. Joe's had a ton of talent last year under Billy Lang. They had Xavier Brown. They had Eric Reynolds. One of the best backcourts, what should have been one of the best backcourts, not only in just the A-10, but in the entire country. Didn't hit. I'm not a Billy Lang guy myself, but Xavier Brown should be a good fit somewhere else. I expect him to go to a high major. Mustafa Thiam from, I believe it's team, I believe it's pronounced, from UCF to Cincinnati. This is a nice pickup. Huge 7-foot guy, can really block shots. I like this pickup for Wes Miller in Cincinnati here. At 39, I got Rylan Griffin. Rylan Griffin was a highly regarded transfer last year. He was probably the best transfer outside of Zeke Mayo for Kansas this past year, which didn't really say a lot. This Kansas team was so incredibly disappointing. But people really thought Rylan Griffin was going to hit at Kansas just because he's a proven guy. Really shoot the three. He just wasn't awesome in that system. So I'm curious to see if he will be awesome in another season. It would be kind of funny to me if he went back to Alabama. Wouldn't that be something? Ante Brizovic from Charleston. He was a big name early in the year. Remember in the Field of 68 Classic? I know I'm deep diving into this one. It was forever ago. He looked like the best player in the country for a little bit there. He'll be a big name, and I expect him to go to just a well-coached team that utilizes a big guy real well. Excited to see what he does at the next level. Reed Bailey going from Davidson to Indiana. You'll see him a little higher on some lists. I'm a little skeptical of it. I think he's going to work out. It's a big jump. It's a big jump going from Davidson to Indiana, obviously. But Davidson was not horrible last year. They weren't awesome, but see how Reed Bailey adjusts. Trey Donaldson going from Michigan to Miami. So you'll notice I'm saying a lot of guys from Miami. Actually, have I said a lot of guys from Miami? I can't remember. I know there's quite a few on this list. We'll see in the next one. Elliot Cadeau going from North Carolina to Michigan. So Dusty May brings in Elliot Cadeau. I'm not a huge fan of this, quite frankly. I know I've been kind of talking up Elliot Cadeau. I'm just not sure. He was the point guard on a 1 seed last year. I will say that he was the point guard on a 1 seed. Michigan's kind of nemesis this year was knocking down threes, and I would have loved to see them bring in a point guard who was just an elite shooter. I know he's a ball handler. He had a ton of turnover problems as well, as did Michigan. So I thought they'd kind of clear that up in the portal. They didn't. I'm not so sure if Dusty May, he's obviously an elite talent. If Dusty May can get him, not turning the ball over and develop a little bit of a shot, it could work, but not my favorite fit. Mackenzie Mbako going from Indiana to A&M. Mbako was a former 5-star. He had a pretty decent year last year, but obviously didn't make the tournament last year or the year before. A&M under Buckyball, he should be, probably the guy that their offense is built around, I would think. Xavier Booker going from Michigan State to UCLA, another former 5-star, lengthy guy, never really panned out too much at Michigan State. Obviously, Michigan State was a fantastic team this year. We'll see if Mick Cronin can get him ready at UCLA. I'm not too optimistic about that one, though. Next up at 46, Morez Johnson going from Illinois to Michigan. More size, more athleticism. Michigan is looking elite. Alvaro Figueres from Robert Morris to Iowa. I love it. He was the player of the year in the Horizon League last year at Robert Morris. Going to Iowa with Ben McCollum. I love this pickup. Know the name. Alvaro Figueres, I believe it is pronounced. Jason Edwards going from Vanderbilt to Providence. How about Kim English picking up a good one here from the SEC? We'll do a little, I should have mentioned in the opening, we'll do a little hot take episode. I don't know if it's really a hot take. I'm not too much of a fan of what Kim English has done over at Providence. I know they have beaten Georgetown and Ed Cooley, which is cool, but they got to get into the tournament. And I know they've dealt with injuries, but we'll do a little hot take. I have a feeling this might be Kim English's either last year or really put him on the hot seat year. But Jason Edwards is a great pickup. So I think Kim English really needed this one, quite frankly. Trey Holloman going from Michigan State to NC State to play for Will Wade. Nice pickup for Will Wade. I think this is a good fit. Nice veteran presence for a new coach in a new program. KJ Lewis going from Arizona to Georgetown. Love this pickup. Great offensive player, great defensive player, just a solid guy to kind of build a foundation around, just a nice glue guy. But this kind of seems like the theme for Georgetown, just kind of, solid guys, but can they play together? That's kind of what we're waiting on. Oscar Clough from South Dakota State to Purdue is up next. Great player at South Dakota State, going to be a great player at Purdue. He's going to coexist with Trey Kaufman-Renn. Purdue's going to be really good next year. At 52, Lawan Watts from Washington State to Texas Tech. Love this fit as well to go play for Grant McCaslin. Malik Renew going from Indiana to Miami. I think Malik Renew is about as overrated as they come, quite frankly. Hate to talk negative about a guy. Every time I saw him play for Miami last year, for Indiana last year, and then get subbed out, I always thought Indiana was the better basketball team when they subbed out Malik Renew. I'm not going to dive too deep into it. I'll talk about that a little more when we do, deep dive into the transfer portal. Now we're just kind of labeling them. But not my favorite pickup there for Miami. Mohamed Diabate going from Alabama to Kentucky. Wasn't really, the Alabama style guy, but he was an absolute necessity to that Alabama team being successful last year. I think he's a good pickup for Kentucky. This is going to be a little change of style for Kentucky with Diabate and who we just talked about, the elite defender that was going to Kentucky. I can't even remember, but two defensive guys that are picked up by Kentucky, which should kind of clear what was their nemesis last year, which was on the defensive side of the ball. Speaking of Kentucky, let's stick with them. Jalen Lowe going from Pitt to Kentucky, elite scorer, didn't really pop off as much as we thought he was. He was a good player this year, but Pitt wasn't anything special. He's going to make an impact at Kentucky, though. I do believe that. Andre Stojakovic going from Cal to Illinois. Fun little, foreign guy going from to Illinois seems to be a common theme, as we'll talk about. It's Zvonimir Visic here in a little bit. Illinois really leaning on the foreigners. Miles Rice going from Indiana to Maryland. Yes, transferring to play for Buzz Williams at Maryland. Maryland putting together a pretty decent little roster here. I think Buzz Williams' ceiling always seems to be a bit low. His floor is always high, though. I think Maryland's going to be good again this year. Isaac McNeely going from Virginia to Louisville. Pat Kelsey and Louisville just want shooters, it seems, and they get Isaac McNeely, who is an elite shooter. Owen Freeman going from Iowa to Creighton. Yes, this seems like a good fit for Creighton. Sebastian Mack, as we mentioned, from UCLA. He is going to Missouri. I like Sebastian Mack a little bit more than some people. I saw a lot of people that did not like what he was doing for the team last year. Now I'm, follow him as much as I can, but I think he'll be a solid fit at Missouri. Zvonimir Visic, as we mentioned, going from Arkansas to Illinois to play with his brother Tomislav at Illinois, along with Andre Stojakovic. As mentioned, they're leaning on the European landscape, which is not a bad idea. It is not a bad idea at all. Nick Davidson going from Nevada to Clemson. Know the name Nick Davidson if you're a Clemson fan. This is going to be your guy this year. Nick Davidson, an elite basketball player, very smart basketball player as well. Dan Skillings Jr. is going from Cincinnati to Baylor. You might see him a lot higher on some lists. I think he's a good player and he's got a lot of potential. I just don't think he's really panned out yet. So we'll see if Scott Drew can get him ready. Jaron Stevenson is going from Alabama to North Carolina. Same with Jaron Stevenson. After his freshman year, Jaron Stevenson was really getting on NBA big boards because he's, 6'11-ish and can move. He's quick, can shoot the three, but he was just a little disappointing this year in my mind for Alabama. He really didn't even end up playing many minutes down the stretch. Motas Vokatitis going from Florida Atlantic to Texas. Sean Miller and Texas, they've picked up some pretty solid recruits along with Simeon Wilcher, who's not on this list. probably would be like my first guy off this list. So he's a good pickup, but wanted to mention his name as well. Vocatitis, though, big 7-footer from FAU. Nice pickup here. Doug McDaniel going from Kansas State to Memphis. I love it. I really like this. I like Doug McDaniel. I think Doug McDaniel is a good basketball player. I want him to succeed on a big stage, in Memphis. They're going to be replacing PJ Haggerty. Doug McDaniel, that's a solid start. Josh Dix going from Iowa to Creighton. I've seen Josh Dix like up in like the top 20s of rankings. I don't really know why. Like, he's solid. He can really shoot it, but yeah, I think it's a good fit at Creighton. Creighton always loves to shoot the three, but like not my favorite transfer ever. Nigel Pack going from Miami to Oklahoma. He's a proven winner. He's been to the Final Four. He's a very clutch player. Going to Oklahoma, I think this is a good foundation for Porter Moser there. Trey White going from Illinois to Kansas. You'll notice we haven't mentioned Kansas too much now, have we? Kansas looking like they're making a little bit of a different approach this year instead of just getting all the huge names like they did last year. Didn't really work out. AJ Storr just bottomed out, basically. But Trey White going to Kansas should be a good fit. Nick Boyd going from South Dakota State not South Dakota State, San Diego State. There's two SDSUs. San Diego State to Wisconsin. I love Nick Boyd. He played in the Final Four for FAU. He was solid last year at San Diego State. I think he'll be solid again at Wisconsin. Taylor Bowen going from Florida State to Bama. Dalen Swain going from Xavier to Texas. Dallin Hall going from BYU to Virginia to play for Ryan Odom. Chad Baker-Mazara just transferred today, going from Auburn to USC. And then Miles Colvin going from Purdue to Wake Forest. Those are the guys in the 70s right there who I just have labeled. Now, obviously, there is a million, and I mean a million people in the transfer portal, it seems. There's so many other notable names. I just kind of wanted to label some of these guys. And I did try and throw in a bunch of guys that already committed. So if you see some guys on here where you're like, wow, they're still out there and haven't committed. Yeah, I tried to get so we get a little feel of what the rosters might look like. So that is 1 through 75 in our transfer rankings. I'm sure I'll change it a million times because, like, how do you compare Doug McDaniel to Matas Vocatitis? Like, one's like 5'10", one's 7'2". Yeah, how can you compare that? So it's just, take it with a grain of salt, the rankings, the number next to them. It's just labeling them. All right, now let's talk about a few of the freshmen that we probably just want, that you probably just want to know for the year. Starting with AJ Debinsa, he's the number one recruit. Now, this list is according to ESPN. Darren Peterson is actually number one at 24/7 Sports, so take it as you must. AJ Debinsa going to BYU, as mentioned, rumored like somewhere around $7 million. Now, he got asked about it in the middle of a game, and he kind of like denied it. But yeah, I'm sure he got an absolute bag at BYU. Darren Peterson going to Kansas. Yeah, Darren Peterson going to be the next elite guard for Bill Self in Kansas. He is 6'6" and can just score the basketball. He is an elite offensive player. Cameron Boozer going to Duke, along with his brother Caden Boozer, also going to Duke, as you can see down at number 16. Nate Ament, I know it says uncommitted on here. He has recently committed to Tennessee. Rick Barnes, yes, Rick Barnes getting a that was the one I mentioned where I said that we were going to mention Rick Barnes again. Nate Ament, and along with Jacoby Gillespie, yeah, Tennessee's going to be here to stay. Rick Barnes has a ton of juice left. Darius Aitcuff is going to play for John Calipari at Arkansas. Darius Aitcuff and John Calipari seem like a perfect fit. Calipari always produces great guards, and Aitcuff looks like he's going to be the next one. Chris Sinak Jr. going to Houston. Houston with an elite recruiting class this year. They also bring back quite a few guys. They did lose Terrence Arsenault, but yeah, Houston's going to be, they might be preseason number one. If it was right now, they probably would be preseason number one. Caleb Wilson going to North Carolina. North Carolina back on the train of picking up huge commits. Mikel Brown Jr. going to Louisville. Top 10 recruit, top 8 recruit going to Louisville. How about that? Koa Pete going to Arizona, recently committed. Arizona with another great freshman class under Tommy Lloyd. Malik Thomas also going to play for John Calipari and Arkansas. Arkansas is going to be here to stay after making the Sweet 16. Braden Burries also going to Arizona. As we mentioned, great recruiting class. Elijah Arenas going to USC. USC has a ton of money. One thing to note, hopefully Elijah Arenas is okay. He got in a massive car accident. It's reported that he escaped without really severe injuries. He was put in an induced coma, which is really scary. ended up, word came out that he's fine, has no major injuries. So I'm glad to hear that. Scary stuff there. Son of Gilbert Arenas, will definitely make an impact on USC this season. Isaiah Harwell also going to Houston. Yes, Kelvin Sampson getting some good recruits. Braylon Mullins going to UConn to play for Dan Hurley. This is the one I'm not 100% sure how to pronounce it, unfortunately. Tunde Yesufu. I know it's Yesufu. Tunde, I believe it is. He is going to play for Scott Drew and Baylor. We already mentioned Caden Boozer going to Duke. Jasper Johnson going to Kentucky. Trey McKinney, 5-star, going to Michigan. Michigan is going to be nasty this year. Jalen Harrison, how about this? Going to Notre Dame. Micah Shrewsbury pulling a little juice there. And then Kingston Flemings going to Houston. So 3 top 20 guys for Houston. They are going to be, quite frankly, pretty elite this year, it seems. Now, the last thing to talk about, let's just talk about what the odds look like to win it all in 2026 in just under a year. I wouldn't place any bets right now, but there is one bet that I do really love. You will notice when I say it, they're not even on this list, which is what I love. Duke is plus 1,000, as is Purdue at plus 1,000. Those are your top 2 teams. Purdue's going to bring back Braden Smith, Trey Kaufman-Renn, bringing in Oscar Clough. They're going to be really good. Houston is also going to be really good, plus 1,100. UConn right behind them to get back on the wagon at plus 1,500. BYU plus 1,600. St. John's plus 1,800. Kentucky plus 2,000, as is Kansas, Florida, Louisville, all plus 2,000. Then Auburn, Arkansas, and Alabama all at plus 2,500. The one I love isn't even on here. It's Michigan. I think Michigan's going to be a top 5 team next year. At worst, top 10. I think Michigan's going to be cooking. They are plus 3,000 if you're looking for a flyer. It's crazy to bet on college basketball right now. But, if you want to throw in, a little NBA Finals parlay with the winner of the NCAA tournament, give me Michigan right now. Give me Oklahoma City and Michigan, or the Cavs in Michigan. How about that little parlay? That would work out. Also kind of like St. John's at plus 1,800. I think Rick Pitino is going to get back at it. All right, so only about 40 minutes today talking about, just what to know for 2025-26. A brief description, some players, new coaches, freshmen, championship odds. We're going to talk more about this throughout the entire offseason. Our next one will be the way too early top 25. Hopefully coming, we're going to try and do every 1.5, 2-ish weeks recording a podcast. I don't want to overload everyone, but if you make it a little longer like that, people get a little more excited when you see the name come up with. If you got those post notifications, turn on. Make sure you do that, and make sure you hit that like and subscribe button so we can talk about all of this. Leave your comments, leave your thoughts. Some transfers that I didn't label that you think are, hey, it's just my opinion. There's a million transfers out there. It's so many. It's wild. And then be sure to follow us on Instagram and TikTok at Bracket Science with 2 S's. I know we haven't posted on there in a little bit, but we are going to get back to it. We're going to talk about, coaching carousel, transfer, same thing we're going to be talking about on here. Everyone enjoy the off season. Enjoy, a little rest from ball. We'll get back on it starting in November. November can't come soon enough. Thanks to everyone for tuning in. We'll talk to you next time. See you later.